Start the Zoom and then we can get started today. Maximilian, we're going to get going.
Okay. Are we just public comment?
Yeah, we're doing it at the beginning.
Is that the beginning?
Yeah.
All right.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's Government Structure Committee meeting of the City Charter Reform Commission. It's nice to do this in an off-site. Appreciate that you came all the way out to Pierce College. I'm going to call this meeting to order by starting with the roll. The chair is President Commissioner Fuentes.
Present.
Commissioner Matt.
Present.
Great, thank you. Let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Great. Seeing no, second? I'll second it, there we go, okay. Seeing no debate, we'll go ahead and accept those as approved. We don't have any elected officials with us today. So we're gonna go ahead and get started first with public comment, and then we'll go ahead with neighborhood council comment following that. So just hang tight if you have a community impact statement. But let's start with public comment. I will leave it to our executive director to administer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we just received a note from Councilman who was unable to join us, Councilman Bob Blumenfield, whose district we're in. Thank you to staff for joining us today. He sends his regrets, but he's stuck in a committee meeting at City Hall, so he wasn't able to be here with us. Alrighty, folks, I am going to call names up. It is a one-item agenda plus general public comment. So that's 2 minutes of public comment. I'll ask each person to let me know how long they're going to take. We'll give a 30-second warning, and we'll go from there. I'm just going to call basically everyone up. Chris, Ryan, Dennis, and Michael in that order, up to the lectern right up here. Denise. Thank you. So, Chris, Ryan, Denise, and Mike. Alrighty, Chris, how long would you like?
I can get 3. 2 is the max.
2 is the max.
All right, and 2 is what I need.
Okay, and begin.
Okay, we need ranked choice voting urgently because we are so divided these days. This gives us voters the freedom to express their real preferences, not just their least objectionable option. By ranking candidates, people can show where they truly stand on issues. Now, but for large governing bodies like the Los Angeles City Council or the LA County Board of Supervisors, we need to go a step further. These institutions represent millions of people with countless perspectives. To truly reflect that diversity, we must adopt proportional ranked choice voting. When people feel ignored or shut out, their anger festers, and history shows that silencing large groups only deepens divisions. Proportional representation ensures that even minority viewpoints have a seat at the table. It channels frustration into dialogue and turns polarization into problem solving. And this isn't theoretical, it works. Portland, Oregon has already adopted proportional ranked choice voting, bringing fairer representation to their council. Cambridge, Massachusetts has used it for decades with great success, creating one of the most stable and diverse collaborative city councils in the country. Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota have also shown ranked choice voting fosters civility and consensus in local politics. Los Angeles now stands at a historic crossroads with nearly a quarter of California's population. LA choices shape not only the state, but often the nation. And that's why it's absolutely imperative that the Government Structure Committee strongly advise the City Council Charter Reform Commission to recommend adopting proportional ranked choice voting. Fair representation isn't just about equity, it's about restoring trust, cooperation, and progress. If we want a government that works for everyone, this is the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Ryan.
First off, I gotta second everything Chris said. It's gonna be better written than what I have.
1 or 2 minutes?
Let's do 2.
Okay, go.
I'm from CD2, I'm from North Hollywood, and my name is Ryan Johnson. I'm here in support of proportional ranked choice voting, and it's partially because of what I saw this morning. I got up at 5:45 this morning to attend today's city council meeting. I waited for 2 hours in line to voice my support of rent control. And in that line, I was having heated and not heated debates with people in support of small mom and pop landlords. And I think they made really lovely points. I don't think people like me, people who are kind of lefty, also make really lovely points. I wish I could vote for a balance of those powers. That's what proportional ranked choice votes can give us. What it can really give us is it means that I can be represented by 3 people. Someone who represents maybe my most progressive point of view and my most conservative point of view. I can be of multiple minds like most of us are. This would decrease our amount of political polarization and result in a place where, in a city where more of us feel enfranchised and respected by our city process. That's the bulk of what I have to say. Other people are going to cite better stats than me. That's my time. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you so much, Ryan. Dr. Denise Roman.
He's a professor here.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
We love educators.
oh, thank you. Well, we love you. Hi, so I didn't know people were going to be talking about the same thing. I'm here to talk about ranked choice voting. My doctoral dissertation was on ranked choice voting at UC Irvine, and the main, I'll try to cover things that weren't talked about so much, which is choice is really important. People really like the idea of ranking choices instead of, you pick one person, then there's a runoff, and the person you picked isn't there. And it's frustrating because you don't have anyone on the ballot to vote for. So if you get to rank your choices, you have more say. It's more democratic. Also, you save a lot of money because everything is done in one go. You don't have to make people come back when there's lower turnout. And also, what my dissertation was about how much less negative it is. Because instead of saying, that's my opponent and I hate them and here's why, what I saw people doing, I went to San Francisco to study it, where they do that with single choice. They would say like, vote for me, and if you don't want to vote for me, you might want to rank me second because I'm so similar to this other person there. And they actually were starting to form coalitions and campaign together. So in this terrible system where people are so at each other's throats and it's so negative and hostile, and you know what that does? We know as political scientists, it makes people stay home. They instead of voting, they lose interest.
30 seconds.
It actually will increase participation because it's less negative and it makes people feel better about being involved in the political process. And that's what we want to get all these young people to care and to come out and vote. And it will have that effect. So thank you. Thank you for my time.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, Michael.
Before we go with that, I also want to remind the audience that we have translators in the back. So if you need translation services, located in the back. Thank you.
Hello again. So we've been at this since July, and during that time, the whole Prop 50 California versus Texas race to the bottom has happened. And if we needed a reminder about the inherent limitations of representation that come with single seat districts, the Prop 50 fight brought that home. And that really tees it up for your committee and your commission to recommend something transformative, because this is the moment that everybody's questioning single seat districts. From a process standpoint, the last time we presented to you, I think you asked for a bunch of questions to get clarified. And I'm hoping that for next week, the list of those can be out there. We gave you a couple of memos already on some of the points, and we want to be clear on everything that else needs to get answered. For next steps, I'd like to see you have the people from Portland on video conference, and maybe also New York City, and for both of them on how they made their transition to using proportional ranked choice voting and ranked choice voting. That's number one. Number two, from our side, the advocates, we should put together for you a further in more depth compare and contrast between a few levels of 3-seat district models from 21, 27, 33, 39, 45. Those would be sets of 3-seat that also had an odd number of people on the council, which we want to do. And look at all the angles, what kind of representation compared to single seat districts of the same number of seats you get from that. Let's look at voter turnout in those areas. Let's look at a whole bunch of it. And I think if we can do that and you go through the experience of talking to Portland, New York, you should be in a place to be able to make some good decisions. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, my next three speakers are Jamie, Rob, and Marcella. Jamie, Rob, and Marcella. Please come up. Hi, Jamie, how long?
All items?
2 minutes, go for it.
All right, I'm Jamie York. And I'm here today to ask why this commission doesn't have telephonic public comment. You guys say that you want to hear from the voices of the city. Is this the city? Is this all the voices? We live in a technological age. We have 4 million people who live here, and you still haven't figured this out? I have a life. So the only reason I can attend this meeting is because it's near where I live. I would like to have attended the other meetings. I have attended the ones where there was telephonic comment because of one of your commissioners being sick. But you made a process that is exclusionary. And you should honestly be ashamed for that. Also, I would like to talk about the staff report. This fuck-ass report. I'm sorry, I wrote better things in a procrastination deadline in college than this. It lacks citation and it lacks context. So let's talk about independent redistricting. Because independent redistricting wasn't some concept that was suddenly introduced. It was introduced in response to the Fed tape scandal. There's no context there. But there was actually a motion in council before that, after the disastrous redistricting, that was left untouched by council until the Fed tape scandal forced its hand. The reality is that we have a city council that doesn't respond to things because it's for the betterment of the people. We have a city council who responds to what's good for what gets them
30
reelected
seconds.
and what's good for who lobbies them. But it's not something that is responsive to the people of Los Angeles. I'm on my neighborhood council, I'm the president, I'm not here in that capacity. But I hear all the time from my neighbors and from my constituents who feel disengaged, who feel left behind, and who feel deserted by city services. But they don't have the ability to come at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday
And take your
to
time.
speak about what they need.
Rob, and then Marcella. Rob, then Marcella. 1 or 2 minutes?
I'd like 20 minutes to respond to the report. Take 2. Ready to go?
Yeah, go.
All right. Now, after seeing this report, I understand why the staff pushed the commission to delay any decision-making on major issues until January. We don't have a staff that's prepared to give us the reports we need so we can actually deliberate, and that's why we're having this drawn-out socialization of policies. Question, why is it that both Fair Rep LA and RLA asked you to explore lowering the voting age to 16? The full commission echoed that, and then this staff report makes zero mention of it. This report is more or less void of citations of the opinionated claims it makes, which I can't really get into. You couldn't pass an undergrad class with that kind of work. We get a paper-thin presentation of the issue of council size. We get long paragraphs describing street boundaries instead of actually just putting a screenshot of the region you're discussing in there so people can actually understand what you're talking about. It claims Asian Americans are underrepresented, and Asian Americans make up a larger share of our council than they compose in the electorate. We see an outlandish claim that increasing council size could result in extremely low turnout in certain districts, but this is just a matter of how the pie is being divided. It's not actually changing the overall turnout. Beyond that, one of the studies cited above that on at-large districts suggests that moving to districts bumps turnout because they're smaller and there's more focused campaigning. Personally, I think smaller districts would produce more competitive elections, more voter outreach, engagement, and higher turnout. On the note of turnout, our low turnout issues are tied to primaries only. November 2024 had twice the turnout March did. To illustrate this, the March's lowest turnout in a district had a higher turnout in November than March's highest turnout district. We have the public advocate. I would just note that there's no mention of the fact that this position can intro and second motions, that they serve as a non-voting member on all committees, or that they're first in line to be the mayor. I don't know why UNRI LA is listed as a supporter when Fair Rep LA is presented on this twice. The issue of multi-member districts just exposes that the staff doesn't know what they're talking about. To suggest ranked choice voting is something you maybe could throw in there doesn't do the
Thank
issue
you, 2
justice.
minutes.
You know what you're talking about. You know that you don't achieve the gains.
Thank you, Marcella. And 1 or 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Go.
Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. Thank you for the report that you've put together in advance of this commission. Once again, I'm Marcella, the ED of Cal RCV. Glad to be here. Upon reading the report, I'm glad that you guys were able to put something together in advance of this meeting. I do want to see a little bit more in terms of what the commission asked, the folks on this commission asked the staff to put together, specifically getting experts to come and speak to the commission from Portland, from Redondo Beach, New York City. These folks have actually used RCV. They know what the implementation looks like, both on the educational side and also when it comes to administering the actual elections. I think that perspective would be really beneficial for you all to hear, not just hearing from us as advocates. Additionally, there were a lot of questions that I think were brought up during that last meeting that we can offer a response to, and we have the resources to point you in the right direction. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We don't have to be the ones responding all the time. We can send you to the right people. So thank you again for that report. I appreciate the work that went into it. And again, you're here as a resource.
Thank you so much. That is the folks who signed up. Was there anyone else? Feel free. And again, if there's anyone, I see 1 or 2, fantastic. Last call, if you'd like to speak, please head this way. Want to make sure everyone got a chance. All right, perfect, thank you. 1 or 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
And begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you people that were able to take off in the middle of the day to attend this. And at least it's here in the valley for those of us in the valley. But what I would like to speak to is the fact that City Council no longer takes telephonic public comment. And that is so disenfranchising to everyone in this room, to all the stakeholders across the city. It is so difficult to make it downtown. For those of you that came from another part of town, you know how long it took you to get here. Now imagine going back downtown and then having to return, take off from work, arrange childcare, etc. And as a neighborhood council member, I can at least notify my council member to arrange for parking underneath City Hall. But for the majority of the people that don't have that connection, they have to pay in a lot to voice their concerns. And that's disenfranchising. So we must, as part of the charter, put back in and make it part of the code that we allow public comment over Zoom or over telephone. It worked so well during COVID at City Council. It worked great at the
30 seconds.
council level, and it works great at commissions and so forth. And you get so much better participation. Now, assuming that we had that, it doesn't address getting the City Council to actually listen. But at least to be heard, we need to restore public comment in keeping with this century and the technology that's available to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And next. 1 or 2 minutes?
2 minutes, please.
2 minutes, and go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm Colin Castelline. I'm the resident of downtown Los Angeles, and I'm also the LA chapter chair for the Equal Vote Coalition. We've submitted written comment with our recommendation for expanding the council to at least 21 members using single-member districts with star voting. This will be an important step to make the electeds more accountable to their voters and to ensure more communities are properly represented on the council. Single member versus proportional districts is one of the decisions you'll have to make with the council resize, and sometimes the concept of winner take all is used to discourage the single member option. The idea being that the winner gets to have purview over an entire district while only having a mandate from a fraction of the voters. Using a proportional method is one way to mitigate this. this, but single-member star voting is a far simpler option, as star voting doesn't have the same winner-take-all dynamic from other methods. Under star voting, candidates are incentivized to represent their entire district. In a competitive star voting election, candidates will need 5s from their base as well as 1s, 2s, and 3s across the board in order to win. And as a voter, if your faction doesn't make it to star's automatic runoff, your vote still gets to be counted towards your backup option. This gives minority populations in the district leverage over their elected officials that they wouldn't have under other voting methods. Again, I support increasing the council size and redrawing districts to help ensure all groups are properly represented. And star voting is your best option to maximize representation gains from the reform districts. Thank you so much.
Pretty separate. Perfect. Thank you. Nick, I assume got it.
Yeah.
1 or 2 minutes.
2 minutes, please.
Okay.
Let's start it now.
Go.
Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Nicholas Caputo. I'm under Livable Advanced Los Angeles. We work across the city, primarily in downtown Hollywood, on the biggest urban cores, on governance, urban planning, and service delivery reform, and I appreciate the Commission's dedication to a more functional city. Los Angeles needs a modern government structure that actually matches its size and complexity, and that starts with expanding the city council. 15 members for 4 million people is structurally unrepresented. We need districts small enough for real constituent service and real oversight. But expansion shouldn't be arbitrary. We should build a durable, data-driven system, automatically resizing after every census to the lowest odd number, where each council district has more than 135,000 residents. If done today, that will lead to 29 council members, which, given most council members are okay with options in the 20s, that gives us the most bang for reform. This ensures predictability, prevents local gaming, and ensures representational scales with the city's population. And keeping the number odd avoids tie votes, creating more equitable community-sized districts. But expansion only succeeds if we also fix the structure. Today's council acts as a hybrid legislator, executive, local administrator, and that fusion of roles creates bottlenecks, patronage, and inconsistent service delivery. We need a legislative-only council that sets policy, approves budgets, and conducts oversight, and nothing else. With veto authority, of course. Departments should not be micromanaged by 15 fiefdoms. That requires executive reform. LA needs a modernized executive branch. The mayor can truly manage the city with transparent authority over general managers, performance management, and service levels. And we need to clarify the city attorney role that protects independent legal responsibilities while no longer being used, unintentionally or intentionally, to block routine administrative operations. When powers are clear, accountability becomes real. Finally, these reforms must rest on democratic legitimacy. That means adopting ranked choice voting for all city elections yesterday, now. Los Angeles already has all the puzzle pieces to build a world-class civic structure. Most cities are looking for the puzzle piece they don't have, but we have them all. We just need to organize them better. And that starts with this commission, and specifically with this committee. Thank you very much for your time and work in this essential effort. I'll talk to you again soon.
2 minutes. Perfect. And last call. Once, twice. Mr. Chair, that concludes public comment for today.
Thank you. We'll now move on to neighborhood councils who have approved community impact statements. I believe one was submitted virtually, but if anybody is here to give that in person. Yes.
Are you referring to the one from Woodland Hills Warner Center?
I might be. I received one in email. But if you have a community impact statement that you would like to read, feel free, but if not, don't worry.
Well, I'm the filer on that. So.
Would you like to come up and give some remarks then? Thank you. Glad that you're here.
As I said earlier, I'm glad that you're here. And putting on my official hat.
Wait till the microphone.
There you go. Keep track of the precious time. I'm Heath Klein, and I'm the treasurer and co-chair of the Woodland Hills Warner Center Neighborhood Council's Community Policy Impact Committee, WIP, and I'm a CIS filer, and we just filed another CIS this morning, yesterday, 3 a.m., talking about the fact that city government stifles us from being able to contact other levels of government. So, for example, the representatives of the supervisors themselves, state assemblies, state senators come to our meetings, they want our input, and we're asked to give it, and then the city tells us through an unsigned policy that no, you can't contact other levels of government. And that is so wrong, because we're the voice of our neighborhoods. We're elected from the grassroots of our neighborhood. We're familiar with the local issues. And when we bring them to the city council, to various departments, to the mayor, we get zero response, kind of like the CISs that we file. And you're to be commended for actually listening to us, which the city council and most departments don't. But the problem is, we're told, oh no, only the city council and the mayor can speak for the city of Los Angeles. And they're confused about that, because we're not speaking for the city of Los Angeles. We are speaking for our own communities. And we make that quite clear in our interactions. And there's no doubt on the part of the state electeds, the county electeds, the federal. Brad Sherman comes to one of our meetings. He doesn't mistake us for the city council. He doesn't think, we're speaking for the position of the city, but he wants our feedback, and we're told we can't give it. Now, that is totally different than the way neighborhood councils started out. I thought I got extended time.
Yeah, you got 3 minutes, we're at 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Thank you. So, we want to be able to give that input, because the city doesn't give input on local issues. And when we ask them to give input, they don't. So we need a way to deal with the State Department of Toxic Substances, dealing with the contaminated soil here at the former Rocketine plant and so forth. And the city doesn't take a position on it, but it affects our community. We have to be able to give them that input when they're putting truck routes to take 10,000 loads of soil through our streets next to our schools. We need to tell them, you need to find a different haul route or a different path. So we would love for you to put in, as part of the charter reform, what we were allowed to do in the beginning, which is give the opinions and the feedback of what's going on in our communities. Thank you very much.
You do have more time if you wanted, but once you're finished.
No, I'll save it for another meeting,
Okay.
other topics. Thanks.
We'll bring you back, we look forward to it.
Thank you. I actually want to flag that neighborhood council reform is not germane to this committee, but I appreciated everything that you had to say. So I'm going to ask for a motion to have that community impact statement transmitted to the appropriate committee so that they can see that. Great. Oh, then it's done. Great. Well, thank you, staff, for doing that. Great. So that concludes all of our housekeeping and comments and things. We're now going to move on to items notice for public hearing. We're going to have our staff basically walk us through this report, and then staff will stop and ask questions, but feel free to go ahead and get started.
Sure, we're gonna queue it up on my screen here in a second. Max, you wanna read, or someone just read the item?
Sure, so this is item number 1, discussion relative to potential government structure related charter amendments, including, but not limited to, issues related to current city executives, city attorney, elections and voting, and possible action regarding related report back requests and related matters.
All right, I think we're good. I'll do this one. Sure. Thank you, go.
Actually, I'll stay up there.
Okay.
Go through the slides.
We're gonna
Is that
follow the
okay?
microphone. That one doesn't work.
Oh,
This
okay.
one does. There.
Hello. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Max Podemski. I'm the Deputy Director of the Charter Reform Commission, and I'm going to be walking you through the recommendations in our staff report. So the way this staff report is compiled is it comes from recommendations that we received during presentations to the committee and the commission. as well as recommendations from council motions on the Charter Reform Council file, and letters from departments as well. And this is a list of some of the presentations we've had related to government structure. We've had many different full commission meetings and committee meetings, so have a whole range of presenters, both from advocate groups here in LA, various cities, and also academic institutions.
I just realized our commissioners don't have the deck and they can't see the screen either, but if you want to, you can kind of see it if you want. The deck is also posted on the website right now, so if you want to look at it on the phone, but it's just a compilation of what you're seeing here. It's a shorthand of it. But we did just post this on the website maybe about 45 minutes ago as well.
So we compile all those recommendations. Staff, we do not add our own recommendations, so this is really a list meant to reflect the feedback the commission has received so far. And we also work with other departments within the city, so we send this document to city attorney to review. I will note for this one, they did not review the sections related to the city attorney's office, but they reviewed the other sections. The CAO, CLA departments. And then we also reference, council files, as I mentioned, articles, reports. So the first section we're going to go through is on, these are sort of the larger topics in this report with, sub-reforms over them. So the larger, issue areas are single-member districts, multi-member districts, new citywide offices, city attorney, and city control. And we also have elections and voting, amending the city council meeting schedule, and expanding eligibility and appointment authority for commissions. So now first topic is city council expansion. So, just going over, sort of framing this issue with a case study. So, LA has 15 council districts, each representing about 260,000 people. They're the largest council districts in the United States. And in some cases, they result in, neighborhoods being grouped together that have, very different demographic makeups and sort of physical attributes. One example is Watts in Council District 15. So Watts is a neighborhood in South LA. Initially, when Council District 15 was first drawn, it turned in a much broader area of South LA. But as the city has grown and the districts have become larger, that area has basically been shrunk. So we have a situation today where Watts is grouped with Harbor Gateway, the shoestring leading down to the harbor, and communities in the harbor, including San Pedro, Wilmington, and Harbor City. One of the results of this is you've had a situation where at least the last 3 council members and maybe more have come from San Pedro. So this is, sort of a reason, and you can find examples of this in many other council districts from, CD7 that goes from Pacoima up into the Foothill neighborhoods, or CD4 that goes from Sherman Oaks to Los Feliz, of why, people are advocating for smaller council districts where you can group more similar neighborhoods together. So our first sort of reform area here is single member districts. So this would basically be just an expansion of the system we have now. So now we have 15 single member districts. We would raise that number and just have more representatives with one person each representing a certain district. And we tried in this report to give you sort of a range of scenarios. Most reports sort of analyzing council expansion look at a range from 17 to 31 seats. There's several advocate groups that advocate for a minimum of 25 single seats. And then there was a lot of feedback about not going above 31 seats. And the reason for that is once you get above 31, you actually end up, dividing sort of regions of the city and certain neighborhoods of the city. And we do have, so when we did this analysis, we tried to look at certain neighborhoods. So one was the harbor area, because it's sort of like a discrete area that's bordered on all sides by other areas, and look at how these numbers would impact that. And we also looked at Koreatown, which is a community that's come up a lot about needing representation. We used a tool called Dave's Redistricting, which is a free online tool that anyone can use to draw maps. And I believe on Fair Rep LA's website, they sort of have a user guide on how to use that. We didn't want to show these maps because we are not demographers, and there's obviously an intense process for how to divide council districts, but we sort of just use it to illustrate the various impacts of these sizes. So expanding to 21 members, you'd have a council size of 185,000 residents, which is similar to Phoenix. And in that scenario, you are at the threshold where you can actually, Watts is able to be in a council district with other communities in South LA and the harbor area, and part of Harbor Gateway is able to be in their own district. 23 members, you have a similar size as New York City. 25 members, you have 155,000 residents, which is similar to San Diego. There does seem to be some consensus on 25, certain groups advocating for 25, that's a good number of single member districts. 31 is sort of that outer threshold where you have 125 residents per district, which would be similar in size to San Antonio, Texas. But that is, sort of a threshold where you start to fracture certain regions of the city. So for example, let's say you wanted to group the communities east of the LA River into their own council districts, so that crossing the LA River. At that point, you would have to take in communities on the other side of the river. And then we threw in, 53, which would get us to a similar size as San Francisco with 73,000 residents. And you'd have smaller districts, but a lot of different outcomes. So, one of the goals of this commission, right, is we need to choose a number, hopefully, to send to the council. There isn't a lot of, in the research we looked at, there isn't a lot of specific proposals for seats, but, this is all sort of showing you different examples of council sizes. And, one thing I will say is we are going to bring back new iterations of this report with additional scenarios if you'd like us to look at other sizes. But this was really to provide a menu and giving you the range. So, for all of these, we do offer a no change option, which is basically giving arguments against doing this reform. And in some cases, we do this on specific reforms. So when we had the ad hoc committee, the CLA did some analysis about council size. It was sort of more on the practical end about, expanding offices, election years, how you'd have to change, when people are voted into office. And one of the issues they brought up is there would be a big impact on city services. So CLA, advises the council. They basically respond to motions and help them with things. They might need additional staff to respond to requests from more offices, and that could be the same thing for frontline city services, so things like street trimming, LADOT. And obviously you have to find more space within City Hall for offices and potentially more district offices in the districts. We do have a broader critique of single member districts, which is that when you have a member representing one district, they tend to prioritize things in that district as opposed to looking at issues around the city as a whole. And this is sometimes called council prerogative. And you get, a situation where, let's say there is a development project in one district that a council member may oppose, or an infrastructure project. The rest of the council will go along and vote with them regardless of how they feel about that specific project, because it's they respect things within each member's district, even though it might not be in the best interest of the city as a whole. There's also, issues with turnout. We have various amount of voters registered in each district currently, and varying amounts of turnout in elections. And if you create, smaller districts, you could have, areas that have very high turnout and areas that have relatively low turnout in those districts. And then, broader critique of single-member districts in general is that certain communities tend to be dispersed around the city. They're not clustered in one neighborhood. So to draw districts where you would give certain groups a majority or a plurality would be, very difficult under different, to draw with single-member districts. An example would be, creating a council district that has an Asian majority or plurality, as well as renters. So now we're going to move on to another.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
really quickly? Just in terms of the different, I don't know what I would say, for the portion that you just went over, the suggestions and like raised issues, if it could be possible for you all to include citations when possible, I feel like that would be really helpful because that's something we expect of all of our presenters, to have articles and sources for the information and the claims that they're making. So if that's something that could be included in the next report, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we would be citing, so these all come from presentations that you guys had. So it would essentially be citing presentations that were given to the commission. So we can go through and do that.
Yeah, I would like that.
Yeah, and then if you're actually citing, I think pin sites are good, and then anything that they cite internally, it's fine to find an external source that validates that as well, that we can take a look at as well.
Sure.
Is it helpful for you to get all of our feedback section by section, or do you want us to wait at the end for the more section?
However you all want to do that.
I have notes. So let's do section by section, and then we'll do another catch-all at the end. My first comment is kind of on just changing city council more broadly. We've talked about in the larger commission for sure, there are inquiries about cost, and I know the LA Governance Reform Project actually had a specific proposal about the cost that we would, of the budget that just spent on city council in general. So if in the next iteration of this report you could get, I don't know, I know that it's hard to come up with, specific numbers as you mentioned earlier, but really a good idea of what the fiscal impact of this looks like. And then also mentioning that we could have these fiscal impacts in 2030 as opposed to like next year. I think that's helpful to give some context.
For all of these scenarios, or do you want sort of like a base level? If you like one seat costs X amount of dollars, so
I mean, I think
that.
Let's try all the scenarios, and then once we get to actual what our range really does look like, we can narrow down on more specifics in that range.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think for cost, we won't be able to do cost analysis ourselves. We'll be looking for others, be it community members that have, community groups that have done it, or the CLA's office, or departments who have been able to do it. We'll see what we can pull. And again, maybe there's a number out there that somebody said, oh, if you raise it for every seat you raise it by, this is what it is, and we might be able to use that to extrapolate. Like full cost analysis, I don't think we'll be able to pull off, at least at this point.
That makes perfect sense. I also wanted to know if you could provide some additional context on staggered elections. So the problem is that a lot of these ranges are taken and you have to add them in context. So if we had like 25 to 27, council districts, just adding some notes about how an election could then be staggered, and that could appear in this section or elsewhere, but I don't think you're gonna have all 27 seats up at the same time, So other, more technical, election administration stuff related to expansion of city council size.
Yeah, and we can flesh this out more. We did cite, there was 3 different CLA reports to the ad hoc commission where they went in depth on some of these issues, but we can pull some of that stuff out of here.
Thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have thoughts?
No, I was gonna ask about the ad hoc committee since it was referenced here, but you just mentioned that, so.
I think just adding on to the conversation around respondents that they're going to come back with recommendations, and so I think just bringing that back to the conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, there's sort of, deeper questions with the cost issue for you all to analyze. For example, now, council offices have pretty large staffs. So for example, should they maintain the same level of staff as they have now? If they expand, we get into some of these issues later on in the report about how New York does it, but there's sort of some deeper issues. And that's also one thing, we wanted to highlight in this report is we had a lot of presentations talk about council size, and they alluded to the role of the mayor. And they, the LA Governance Reform Project specifically mentioned cities like Chicago and New York that have much larger councils, but also much more powerful mayors. And that relationship would have to change in certain ways, but we didn't receive many presentations that sort of talked about what that role of the mayor should be, what their powers should be. And that's sort of another thing that that you all might want to look into, which would impact, for example, the size of a council staff in some ways.
I think you beat me to the bullet with that one, but I was gonna ask that you actually include, some language about expanding the role of the mayor, and I think, at least myself, but the committee members can chime in, you have the purview to conduct your own research if needed, if it wasn't mentioned. I know that we've had presenters that have mentioned how weak the mayor is, but when we have a larger council, even CAO had mentioned at their first presentation that it means that there's gridlock and we should consider changing veto ratios and things, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do think that it's totally fine for our staff to do some more research about what some good expansions of the role of the mayor are that are needed if we have a larger city council. Sure. And I'm not a mayoral appointee, I know that.
Thank you for the caveat, Mr. Chair. We will definitely look at that, and of course welcome our community partners that are listening or here in the room, that if they have any presentations on that matter as well, we'd be interested in talking about that. But we will definitely put them into our queue for research.
Feel free to move to the next section.
All right.
Thank you.
So this is moving on to multi-member districts. So probably the most relevant example of this is, Portland, Oregon recently did a charter reform process. They had sort of a unique council structure where they basically had at-large council members and went to a structure where they have 4 districts, but each district is represented by 3 members. So instead of having one person represent one district, you would actually have multiple people representing a single district. And there's also another sort of an example of multi-member districts, and Philadelphia is an example of this. So Philadelphia is divided into 10 geographical council districts, but then they have 7 at-large members that are citywide. So each person essentially has 2 representatives. And we have a couple different scenarios. We might be adding on additional ones, but in future staff reports. But this is sort of to give you, example of different ways these multi-member districts could look. So one, example is having, you basically keep our 15 members as we have now, but then divide the city up into 5 districts. So each of the current members would be, or 3 of each of the current members would be representing 1 district. And that's been brought up as an easy way to have multi-member districts, and then you could, expand later on, so add additional members and add additional districts. Another proposal we have, and this is actually the recommended proposal from the LA Governance Reform Project, so we had several people present who were on that. That was sort of a coalition of academic institutions who came up with recommendations on how to reform LA's government in the wake of the Fed tapes. And their preferred scenario is to have 25 council members and have 20 single member districts, but then 5 of those single member districts would be nested into 1 regional district. Stop me if you, I know it can be confusing, but so, you'd have 5 regional members, but then their regions would be made up of 5 individual council districts.
I understand that. I know that in the elections and voting section, you mentioned like the cons of or potential liabilities that extend from multi-member districts. Could you, in a future draft, bring some of that up here? Because they're connected sections, but they're disconnected in the paper. So for my colleagues, I will flag that that's like one of the last sections in this. It starts on page 34 and 35, where they talk about issues presented from, and it's in the PRCD section. So bringing those up, because there are, I will just be frank, if we have multi-member districts, there will be multiple lawsuits that try to strike down the language, the charter amendments if that passes. So it's important to talk about the procedural posturing that fits into the VRA and then the California Voters' Choice Act.
Yeah. And just kind of, continuing with this thing, so, we've had a lot of public comment, we have presentations, but, the benefit of this system is, you can potentially reduce negative campaigning because people, are incentivized to run slates. It also increases the opportunity of certain groups to be represented. So, for example, as I mentioned, like LA's certain demographic groups are not concentrated, but this gives them an opportunity to be represented in a district. And you also, reduce that council prerogative issue we've talked about, because one person sort of wouldn't own everything in that district. You'd have multiple members and you could potentially have, differing opinions on things. And then specifically sort of this, the nested, so the single and regional hybrid. Some of the advantages there are, you could, groups that are dispersed, you could, group them in a regional seat. So, examples of that is you could group, Chinese Americans or Jewish Americans or Armenian Americans together who might not be concentrated enough in a single member district, but they could be all together in a regional district. And you'd also be able to share certain assets. So, there's certain special funds in the city that, go to certain council districts, and those could sort of be dispersed. And there's also sort of this other issue of what, council members often call assets. So places like the convention center or downtown LA are USC. Instead of those being the purview of one council district, they would be sort of dispersed over a larger region.
Can I just jump in really quick as a clarifying question? I just wanted to ask, amongst all of the write-up in the staff report, were all of the presenters consulted from these write-ups to confirm that what they researched and presented to us is kind of displayed correctly in the staff report?
In some cases we talk to them, but we send it out and we post it in advance. And so we, with all these staff reports, there's a lot of information. We have very limited time to do it. So that's why we will, next week we will send an updated one. So any corrections there are, we will, address those.
Yeah, I think ask, and I think there is value in kind of reaching out to other presenters who just fact check and just make sure that what is written here is kind of in line with what they were trying to present to us, so that we're just not kind of missing presenting them.
We did that with our previous staff report for planning and infrastructure, where we got some feedback and we incorporated it into a revised version. Yeah.
So some of the issues with multi-member districts. As you mentioned, Commissioner Andrade, there could potentially be California Voting Rights Act issues. So that basic, California Voting Rights Act, when that was created, basically, a lot of cities had to change from multi-member districts to, going on by single-member districts, so representing specific geographies, to better represent certain groups. And just quoting Governance Reform Project about this issue of California Voting Rights Act, they said, numerous lawsuits and the fear of lawsuits have led to the transformation of at-large council districts into district-based ones. However, there is little evidence of voting rights challenges in mixed systems. So a mixed system where you'd have both regional and single member. Mixed systems are especially resilient when the district portion of the system clearly outweighs the at-large. So, you know, I guess one of the headlines is this would be a new system for California, and so there may be some legal challenges. And then, you know, some of the issues are similar to the single member districts, just in terms of, you know, their impact on elections, impact on staff, and all of those things. So any other questions on this area? All right, I'm gonna move on to.
Yeah, actually,
Oh, sorry.
for the no change, there's, for a pure multi-member system, there's academic research that shows that it may lead to a lack of accountability. So if you have 3 members that are representing you, it's easy to blame shift. If it's everyone's fault, it's no one's fault. So if you could mention that and cite to some research that shows that that's a possibility and what's been done, I mean, to fix that, because a lot of these things can be mitigated. And then the same is true for how multi-member districts can give a majority community the ability to sweep. If one of the communities of interest that would be in a smaller single seat district system is now with a lot of other communities of interest in the same multi-seat system. If that's a possibility here in Los Angeles with our, you know, dispersed demographics, that would be helpful to include.
Yeah, and I mean, the impression I got from the Voting Rights Act issues, it was more with cities where they had like a Portland model where they were citywide districts that may have sort of disenfranchised certain groups.
Yeah.
So this would be a little different than.
It'd be a little different, but you're going from like our 15 seats to 5 districts with 27-ish seats in the district. 27 seats total, so like 3 and a 5. So I think we should look at it as possible for majority community sweep where you know, ice out the minority group as opposed to the way you would in a single seat. Very technical. If you can't tell, this is what I do in my day job.
Yeah, if you wanna, yeah, very helpful. So yeah, if you have any resources, send over. All right, any other questions on council expansion? Okay, so moving on to new citywide offices. So we did get some proposals for new citywide offices. And this is, you know, an area that does sort of get to that mayoral power question. But essentially, you know, the mayor now has the ability to set up their office how they want. We have some examples of, you know, mayors have created unique positions within their office. But one, you know, proposal that we've had is creating a chief operating officer. So typically parts of the mayor's office are generally not set forth in city charters. So there's not like a clear delineation of the charter that the mayor has to have this, you know, deputy mayor, that deputy mayor. In other cities where they have COOs, they're sort of like an elevated deputy mayor. So our mayor currently has deputy mayors, and basically in other cities you'd have sort of a chief deputy mayor or a COO deputy mayor. There is a section in the admin code that we want to further research that calls for a first and second executive deputy within the mayor's office, but it doesn't give a lot of explanation on, you know, what their roles and responsibility is or why that's in an ordinance. So we want to do some more research on that. So, you know, if you guys wanted to, it's sort of, gets to the question of like, is this something that needs to be done in the charter or needs to be done, you know, or should just be left to the discretion of the mayor, essentially. But, you know, you could choose if you wanted to put in the charter that there should be a COO role. You know, one option for that, right, would be maybe the COO is not in the mayor's office and they're like the CAO or they're appointed by the mayor and confirmed by council. So, but we listed out in the report, you know, examples from other cities where they have this role. Okay, so the second reform here is creating a chief financial officer. So sort of the argument for a CFO is to have a singular centralized office who is responsible for the city's long-term fiscal health and day-to-day financial management. Based on CFOs in other cities, the roles and responsibilities can vary depending on the specific context. They typically serve as advisor that provides guidance to the mayor and council. And they're an office which sets policy to make financial decisions and can choose to heed or ignore, legislative and mayoral offices can choose to take their advice or basically ignore it. The commonality in CFO roles in other city is that they, provide financial planning and strategy, oversight of financial operations, including accounting, payroll, purchasing, budget management, revenue and treasury management, financial reporting and performance auditing, and debt issuance. And currently, a lot of these roles are dispersed among multiple offices in LA. So we have a chart in the report that sort of spells out, how these different functions are dispersed between departments. But basically, mayor and council handle high-level financial strategy and fiscal policy. Department of Finance and Treasury handle day-to-day financial management, and the CAO and controller do both strategy and operations and advise the council along with the CLA, and the CLA's role being reserved specifically for the city council. So creating a CFO in LA can mean several different things, basically on how we want to distribute that power. So New York, we heard from their comptroller. They manage debt issuance with the mayor's office as well as investigating and settling claims against the city. In LA, this would be moving powers from the CAO, council, and city attorney into a CFO's office. And in San Francisco, the controller, who's appointed to by the mayor on a 10-year term to sort of insulate them politically, has some direct power over the budget and is more than advisory. This includes no obligation may be made unless the controller certifies funds. So some key issues to think about when we're deciding whether LA should have a CFO role is how much day-to-day management responsibility should a CFO have? Should a CFO have an explicit role in preparing or analyzing the city budget? Should the CFO be able to halt appropriations if it determines that revenues are insufficient? Should the CFO set the city's financial accounting policies? Should the CFO be appointed or elected? So, do you have any questions on that, or should we keep debating?
You can keep moving on, yeah.
Okay. So, then we have a proposal that was sent by the city controller to basically designate them as the chief financial officer. And that would be similar to New York's comptroller role, or Houston also has a controller. So sort of, all those things we're talking about, removing those powers as they're distributed in the city now and sort of concentrating that in the CFO role. And now I'm going to move on to some other offices. So, one recommendation was to create a new citywide elected public advocate office. So this is an office that's very unique to New York City. Other cities don't have it. And it would basically be, a citywide elected office that would have, certain powers. They could appoint people onto commissions. They could, vote in council. They would be next in line for the mayor. Some of the issues with that is we would be the second city in the country to have that. And there has been, criticism in New York City of that role. So recently there was, council members who were basically trying to get rid of it. And then we have another recommendation would be to create a new office of the tenant advocate. So this would be, something that would be in the charter and basically an office that would be, specifically advocating for tenant issues and helping with, issues related to renters and tenants. Some issues with that is, in New York and Washington, D.C., where they have them, those are not in the charter, they're ordinances. So LA, might be a policy issue where LA could do that. Another issue is, our housing department currently has a lot of those functions. So you essentially be creating sort of a new office and new bureaucracy to do those things and taking away from the housing department. All right, and now I'm going to pass it to Justin to go over the city attorney section.
Thank you, Max. Alrighty, this section does start with a case study on Venice Dell, which we've heard a little bit about before. We did a little extra research after the last meeting, and this kind of outlines in the document a little background on the history of Venice Dell, dating back to about 2016 under a previous mayor and different iterations of the city council. As it moved forward, there was concern that here that you have a resident running for the office of city attorney who did give public comment against the project prior to being elected, and then after being elected, to some people's opinion, did take steps to slow down the project that she had previously spoken against. She also wrote a letter to the California Coastal Commission asking the Coastal Commission to decline the approval of Venice Dell because of its location. It did need to be in front of the Coastal Commission, which did later approve it. So talks a little bit about that project as an example that has definitely been documented a lot in the press as well. We heard presentations on a city attorney from various folks, including Doug Halbert, who spoke. He's a city prosecutor of the city of Long Beach, who spoke about the different models that we see in cities across the state of California. He's on his third term of city prosecutor for the city of Long Beach and has experience working across the state. He spoke about different models, including Long Beach's, which has two separately elected attorneys in those functions, one as the city prosecutor himself and then one as a city attorney. He spoke about cities that have the city attorney appointed, including Burbank, Hawthorne, Inglewood, Pasadena, Santa Monica, as well as other large cities. We heard presentations from New York about their different models of having legal advice throughout the legislative process that where they have staff, city attorney, non-elected teams running from the start of the legislative process. So we look at those models. We have some reforms that were presented by groups including Abundant Housing LA, Fair Rep LA. We point out issues there. Needs to be an independent that there needs to be an independent voice that can provide unwelcome advice when necessary. That is definitely a concern that a lot of people have had. We also had our city attorney present the history a little bit of the city attorney office in the city of LA and benefits of having that separately elected voice. We talk about bifurcating the city attorney's roles, having an elected city attorney elected for just prosecution and separately appointed city attorney for council and legislative affairs. Definitely different ways of approaching that and kind of reshaping those offices. We talk about examples that have that. The closest model that really aligns with that of having those two separate offices, one elected, one appointed, would be the county model, where you have the county of LA has a district attorney, and the county council is not elected, but provides all the legal advice to the board of supervisors and the various departments within the county. And we talk about the other cities that have those examples as well. And then we talk about Office of Legislative Counsel, number 3, which is, again, similar to some of the models that we've talked about and being also advocated by groups including ACT LA, Abundant Housing LA. This would be, again, very much like the city of New York has attorneys who are working within the city council offices for the very start of legislation, as opposed to coming later in the legislative process. It's a full team of lawyers that works directly with the councils, is directly, reporting to the council. So we have that model kind of laid out. And we have all of these are really, the big changes to the authorities of the city attorney are creating different offices. A lot of that has to be done by the charter, so there isn't really a city council action that would effectuate that. There are changes that could be initiated by charter change, and then the council would be able to legislate from there. For example, at the very beginning of where I state that section 202 that says the city attorney is one of the 3 offices or large, deleting that office and letting the city council legislate from there is an option, or this commission can create different offices as well. So there are a lot of offices as well. I do want to say, the goal, my goal as executive director, and I've said this out loud at public meetings in the past, was to have this portion independently reviewed by attorneys outside of the city attorney's office. I am an attorney. I am not a official City of LA attorney. I was not hired in my role to be an attorney. So even though I took part in writing this, I don't hold this out as being reviewed by an attorney for background. We asked for the ability to go to outside counsel. That can only be allowed by the office of the city attorney, and we did not get that. So this, unlike the rest of this, was not reviewed by council.
Can you share why that decision was made?
I cannot say why. Well, I can say that I believe that my request was to at least in case there was a perception, if not a real conflict of interest in reviewing this by the current office holder. Perception is something that we also have to deal with, that I wanted to go by outside counsel. The city attorney's office did not waive it. So I would think that they think that there is not a conflict or perception of conflict.
I was previously informed by our staff that the city attorney did not give our committee the right to seek outside counsel. We're reviewing the role of the city attorney because there have been accusations that throughout several city attorneys, the role has been further politicized. And while I will not go as far to say that this is another act of politicization, I will say that I am really displeased that we weren't immediately granted the ability to have external conflict counsel. The charter does actually have a caveat. We're allowed to ask city council to waive this conflict so that we can go to city council, and city council would give us the ability to seek outside counsel without us having to ask for such a privilege from the city attorney. So right now I would actually like to make a formal motion that will seek a second. On behalf of the committee, I request the support of city council to allow the commission to utilize outside legal services to review and advise all work related to charter sections on the office of the city attorney.
Second.
I will actually take this to a roll call vote, but thank you for the second. The chair votes yes. Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes.
Commissioner Mack?
Yes.
Thank you, staff. We now ask that you transmit our request to city council so that we can get some support when we have all of these amendments that would affect the office of city attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will communicate that to the council president's office. Were there any other questions on this section?
I do actually have a question, and it's mentioned inside of this a little bit, but the Office of Legislative Counsel is option number 3, and then option number 2 is bifurcating the city attorney's role, so having an elected city attorney and then an appointed. So is option 3 saying that we wouldn't actually bifurcate the role, we would just have 2?
They're not dissimilar.
They're not
I think that's what you're getting at, and you're not wrong. There are different combinations of 1, 2, and 3 of shaping this. If the charter commission wants to shape it themselves, again back to there's some action the charter commission can take, and then leave it in council's hands to legislate from there. Again, just by deleting a section. Deleting the title city attorney from 3 offices, and then some other changes, of course. And then, at that point, they can create a office of legislative counsel. They could shift a lot of that authority to CLA's office. They could there are a lot of things, or the commission could do that as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Does anybody else have any comments on this section? Well, thank you, staff. Feel free to move on to our next section then.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, so this Office of Legislative Counsel, so that's sort of going back to that council staff issue. But essentially, in New York, a lot of things that are housed, like here in LA, where we have, a council member has those people on staff, are sort of in more of a centralized role. That's to, facilitate the work of the council. So, that's something that could probably be done by ordinance if they decide to expand council, but just something to consider when we're comparing LA to other cities in terms of council size. All right, so now we're going to move to a series of reforms that were suggested by the city controller, and just start off with sort of a case study, which is the New York comptroller that we had to present. So basically, New York City is complicated in terms of their legal representation, but you have basically a corporation council that represents all elected officials and city agencies. But then the comptroller's office in New York has their own general counsel representing the office's interests. And they're also the sole authority to settle claims against the city, which has been an issue with Los Angeles. And the corporation council must request authority from the comptroller's office to settle claims. The corporation council and comptroller jointly determine whether the city will indemnify employees. So that's just sort of, a different model to think about when we're thinking about our city controller. So the first recommendation is basically for budget independence for the city controller's office. So there's certain departments in the city that basically are guaranteed a certain percentage of the general fund, like the library and recreation and parks. This would essentially be doing that. And the idea is that they would be more politically insulated and be guaranteed a certain amount of funding every year. And there are, models of other cities that do that, like New York and San Francisco and Chicago. The broad issue, which applies to this, and, we have other departments that are requesting basically protecting their budget through this charter reform process is, the more you do that, the less flexibility you have in the budget when, there's hard, difficult budgeting years. Another is requiring minimum qualifications for the city controller. Again, this is, we've had this come up in other areas, most specifically commissions like Planning Commission or the Board of Public Works, to basically, put something in the charter that those people have to have a specific background to serve. The controller did, propose some specific language, which is, city controller must hold a baccalaureate degree from an accredited college or university in accounting, business administration, finance, or a closely related field, or a professional certification in accounting, finance, related field, and 5 years of full-time experience in finance, accounting, business administration, audit, or related field. So yeah, just issues with that is, might potentially shrink the pool of people who could run for that position. And then the third one is clarify the controller's audit authority, that their audit authority includes performance audits over all city programs that are sourced or use city tax dollars, including those under selected offices. This is kind of basically a clarifying language in the charter now. Because basically the 1989 charter reform process did give them authority to perform audits, performance audits, but there's been disagreements about their authority to do audits housed under elected offices, since the language says programs. It does not specifically include the word offices. So it's essentially, this would be, clarifying that in the charter as it's written now.
For that section specifically, would you all be able to create a pull-out case study in the same way you did for the Venice Dell project about the LA Alliance for Human Rights versus the City of LA? I think that would be super helpful context for this portion.
Alliance, which one?
The one that's written right here.
Oh, yeah, oh, yes. Perfect.
Just more detail in that spot.
And then we have, allow the controller to hire outside counsel. So instead of, relying on the city attorney where there might be a conflict, that they can, hire their own outside counsel to make them more politically independent.
On the outside counsel question, obviously I think the need for that might change if we make any changes to the city attorney. So could you just flag for that how that specific proposal might change related to other changes that we might make about the city attorney's office in general?
Yeah, definitely. And that's just highlighting, a lot of these things are intertwined and, you make changes that might, obviate the need for other changes. Okay, so enshrine the city controller's fraud, waste, and abuse function. So the city created a fraud, waste, and abuse unit in 2008, and by ordinance, so it's in the ad code. And basically, anything that's been done by ordinance can be undone by ordinance, and they want that enshrined into the charter. And those are all the proposed changes for city controller. And we'll note we had one proposal, but for the CFO that we moved to a different section. But those are sort of all requests by the city controller's office.
Thank you. I mentioned this previously, but I think that the title Inspector General, I have a DC background, so I really like that title in general. But we're talking about fraud, waste, and abuse, the function, but could you flesh out putting that title into that section? And any cities with inspector generals that would then be able to refer issues of fraud, waste, and abuse to other agencies like the Department of Justice, or they could just release, reports that just details potential fraud, waste, and abuse. So just taking, because I know that inspector generals exist in other cities and parts of government, so marrying that with what we currently have in the city controller's fraud, waste, and abuse function section.
Okay, so sort of adding,
some language, because I think if we hyper search Inspector General, we'll see a lot of other stuff related to this function that other cities are utilizing. Because for a lot of sections, we see how it exists in other cities. So I think that would allow us to see how that specific function exists in other cities.
Okay, that's good.
I would just add, I think LA County has one as well.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, so moving on, elections and voting. There's people in this room who could do a much better job presenting this than I could. Potential reforms are, adopting ranked choice voting. And we split this out just to give sort of additional menu of options, but, proportional ranked choice voting. So that's option 1 and 2. And these are, could be paired with some of those multi-member districts, as we mentioned, sort of going to a Portland model where you have multiple people and you can, rank people. And then we also have star voting as an option on here. And then we have another change that's related to voting, which is, changing ballot access. And this is sort of specifically relevant, I think, to if we're talking about expanding districts. Because, one of the key provisions now is whether you're running for a citywide office or a council district, you have to collect 500 signatures of registered voters in that district. Which seems like it's not a big deal, but basically within the time you have to do it, and then you often have to get much more than that because a lot of them will be thrown out. And it's basically a barrier for people to run, and that's particularly true if we're talking about districts where there's less registered voters. So this would basically be looking at ways to shrink that amount of registered voters and allowing a longer time, and basically putting provisions in this section of the charter to make it easier to run. in elections.
Yes.
So then we have another recommendation, which is a protected budget and independent legal counsel for the Independent Redistricting Commission. So the Independent Redistricting Commission was established in November 2024. The charter does not mandate a specific amount of funding or budget. The funding for the IRC is dependent on council action in the budget process. And advocates say that for the IRC to be truly independent, a budget must be mandated within the charter so that politics in a budget process controlled by the varied people's districts. So basically that, they're not beholden to the council office for their budget and might do, favors to draw their districts in certain ways. So that's voting.
Comment on voting.
Sure.
Page 34, you said that in certain instances, RCV can cause vote splitting issues to arise where two candidates from the same party may cause voters to split, limiting either candidate from reaching 50%, which disenfranchises voters. I think that is just pulled from the wrong place. I think that the issue that you're trying to talk about, maybe, it could just be a different issue in general, is that in RCV, when there's cross endorsements, there could be unethical quid pro quo cross endorsements, but I don't think that the vote splitting issue actually comes up with RCV. So I would just double check the the Cal RCV presentation to make sure that that citation is correct, and if it's not, I would recommend removing it.
Okay. Yeah, that was brought up in another presentation, but we can
double check. Yeah, and feel free to externally validate anyways too if there's conflicting statements.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, moving on. Sorry, I got kind of behind them here. So, we have a proposal, and this comes from an LA City Council motion to amend the meeting schedule of council. From going from 3 days a week to meeting only once a week. And this would be similar to the LA County Board of Supervisors. And the idea is, it would force them to have more efficient meetings and they could spend more time in their district with their constituents. This is sort of there's a lot of issues with this that would need to be considered. One would be access to meetings that Fair Rep brought up. So, that would basically shrinks the time that people have to interact with their council members. So how are you going to, improve access to people? The other is that, if you look on any given council meeting agenda, there's lots of items that they have to approve. A lot of them are time sensitive. So, what happens to that workload? And that sort of gets to a lot of different charter reforms about, maybe you want certain things to be approved by, general managers, for example, or the mayor rather than the council doing it. And then we had a lot of letters from departments specifically on this council motion, which is changing section 245. And that section says actions of boards or commissioners shall become final at the expiration of the next 5 meeting days of the council, during which the council has convened in regular session. So basically, that would change it from like 1.5 weeks that those would be approved to 5 weeks if you have, 1 meeting a week. And there's, just a lot of stuff like that in the charter where it's, there's sort of these time limits based on the number of council meetings that we'd have to go back and change. So a lot to consider with this one. But, we'll say that this was, council motion. There is a lot of interest on the city council in doing something with council meeting days. So definitely something you all should consider. Okay, now we have expand eligibility and appointment authority for commissions. So one is codifying youth participation on boards and commissions. It's sort of helpful to So there's different types of commissions. There's, commissions that are specifically outlined in the charter, and a lot of those are, the mayor appoints and council approves. But there's also tons of commissions in the city that are created by ordinance, and those ordinances have different, mechanism or different sort of provisions on how people are appointed. And a good example of that, right, is the Charter Reform Commission, where the mayor got a certain number of seats, different council members got a certain amount of seats, and then the rest were chosen. So I think for some of these, it's worth kind of like specifying what commissions we're talking about, and whether we're going to go like make one general rule for all of them, or call specific ones out. But yeah, one, allowing for youth participation on boards of commissions. Another on, having non-citizens and non-registered voters participate. So the Independent Redistricting Commission actually tweaked the language to allow that. And there's also, other things language we could tweak in there, where instead of it being a registered voter, you have to show you've lived in, your neighborhood for a certain period of time. We also got some specific feedback on, how commissioners are appointed. So basically this has to do with kind of the deadlines of when people have to be appointed and when they're voted in, getting more flexibility on that. And then, apportionment authority to additional government bodies. So this goes back to there's certain commissions in the charter, outlined in the charter, and that's where the mayor has the authority, but then there's others where council does have authority and different bodies do have authority. So for example, this would be like, do you want, council members to have the ability to appoint people to the DWP commission or the police commission? And then this also kind of goes back to, right, if we're looking at some of those new offices or changing the council districts. So say we go to like that hybrid single member, regional member, maybe the regional member has the ability to appoint people onto certain commissions, or like, that city advocate role, like New York City has. If we adopted one there, you could give them the ability. So that is our report. So are there any questions on that before we go to next steps?
Any questions from other commissioners? I don't know. Go to next steps.
Okay. So, essentially you all will have a series of meetings to deliberate on these. We will update this report to reflect your input, and then, any changes we get from people, things that they would like to change or that weren't reflected in this. So, we will give you an updated staff report, maybe multiple staff reports for each of your meetings. And, essentially, at your meetings, what we advise, right, is going through this, and the goal is to choose, which reforms you'd like to send to the full commission to ultimately go to the council. And so, we're gonna have our committee meetings up until early next year. You all will pick the recommendations you'd like to send to the full commission. The full commission will similarly have, deliberations specifically on government structure. And then ultimately, March of next year is when the full commission will vote on a final package to send to city council for them to deliberate on. So just going over that timeline here. And yeah, we'd like to encourage everyone in the public to please weigh in on this. To use our survey, send in public comment with ideas you have, or if there's specific proposals that appeal to you. And please, encourage your friends and neighbors who live in the city to get involved. This is our survey, which asks about a lot of these questions, just trying to get feedback from people. And you can also find this is, on the homepage of our website as well. And that's
At our next meeting, can we also include in the slides the Rewrite LA opportunities, like the civic assemblies and the survey that they're doing as well?
Yes, we can add that. I guess, so, there's a group that the commission has partnered with called Rewrite LA that's doing public assemblies, which is, a model done in other countries that basically bring people together and sort of deliberate on this. And I believe they're doing applications for people to join those, and they're gonna have a meeting in December. So if you're on our email list, we can send out info on that, and then you can also look up Rewrite LA.
Yeah, we'll be doing some partnership communications with the Rewrite folks to make sure that, on their side, they're gonna get people out to our meetings and vice versa. And then, we just look forward to finding more synergies and collaboration with them to help feed into the public comment and, socializing these documents and this research, and then your recommendations and their recommendations.
Would it also be possible at our last full commission meeting, you all had presented the budget for you all to analyze what the cost would actually be for remote public comment?
So we are implementing remote public comment at all city hall meetings. So for example, we have 3 meetings next week, all at City Hall. And they're committee meetings, and we'll have public comment at all of them. It's just harder technology-wise when we're out in the field, because sometimes we walk into a room where we had Wi-Fi, we were told we had Wi-Fi, and we don't. So it's that added bit of unknown at a lot of these places that I don't want to put out that we're doing public, remote public comment, and then we can't get it to work. Whereas I know at City Hall, it will always work, because we know the baseline there. Out here, the baseline is just harder. Plus, we're out in the community, and it encourages people in the direct community, hopefully, that are coming a little closer. And that's the part of the point of the 15 district meetings, is to hear directly from the residents and neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'd be interested still in what it would cost to do it out in the field in communities, if that's something you all could provide, or if instead we'd be able to allocate what we would spend on remote public comment to double down on outreach or something else like that.
So it's not necessarily an additional cost. It's just it's the technology where the added we have set computers and sound systems and etc. at City Hall that we are kind of little uneven out here. So it's the technological, and again it's not an added price. It's just I don't know if as staff will be able to deliver it per se when we're out here in the districts. I mean, for example, we got to Ramona Park, the rec center on Saturday, where we thought we'd have Wi-Fi, but we didn't. So we used my my city phone as a hub, and thankfully it had just enough bandwidth to broadcast. I don't know if it would have had enough bandwidth to also handle us doing remote public comment, which would be two-way communication. So that's the thing. I don't want to promise something, and if we promise something and we advertise that we're going to do remote public comment, we have to deliver it.
I would just kind of echo what Commissioner Francis was saying. I think portable hotspots is a thing that I've done in my just personal day job. Happy to be a resource as well if that's something we want to explore. But I think going back to the staff report, I was also just going to ask if we can consolidate the recommendations and letters we got from city council members as well. I know today we got a letter, and we've gotten letters in the past. Their recommendations and comments related to our committee can be included in this 4-step report.
Sure.
Or something separate.
Yeah, I think we also have on our website now, if folks get a chance to look at our website, we've made a lot of updates to the document section. I think it's called resources, where we've kind of separated out, there's one link for all public comment. There's one link for various sections, and we can definitely look at, maybe more diversifying it, so there's more links, a link for all city council file items.
Yeah. I think just for purposes of this committee and kind of us going through all of the things, just kind of combining based on issues that they see different things or similar.
Sure.
it would be helpful for discussion and deliberation.
Sure, if you want to take a look at the, with some of the changes we've made to the website and like send specific, like, oh, it'd be great to also have a version of it where it does this and that, that'd be super helpful. Perfect, thank you.
I just think to add on to Commissioner Mack's point, like, I have my letter from the controller right here, and you synthesized a lot of the letter in here, but let's say I got a letter from the CAO, which we didn't have, but I have the report from the CAO. If you could identify for us, at least, places where they disagree.
Okay.
So like if CAO says that there should be a CFO, but it should be in the office of the CAO, and then the controller says there should be a CFO, but it should be the controller, like that is something that I'm interested in seeing, and how these letters disagree. Like Commissioner Blumenfield gave us a nice letter, and I know that other commissioners have either done so verbally, or they've given us letters, and I'm curious to see if there's any synergy or disagreement between these different elected officials and their suggestions.
Sure, I think that's something we can work on.
Thank you. Anything else before I take a motion to receive and file this letter and then implement all suggested changes? Okay, great. Do I have a motion to receive and file and implement suggested changes?
So moved.
Great. Seeing no conflict. I think the word always. We're gonna take that as received and filed. Great. So now that was the one and only item on our agenda. So we will adjourn if I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'm like,
Sorry. Great, thank you. Seeing no disagreement, we are adjourned.
And we have a meeting next week?
Yes, we have a meeting next week to talk about initial deliberations, and then thank you to the public for adjourning all the way out here to come. We appreciate it.
Thank you.